All right, me. It is November 4th. It is midterm election day. And this morning I finished reading Rebound, the Odyssey of Michael Jordan, written by Bob Greene. I read this basically in 2 sittings. I read about the first 200 pages yesterday while I was substitute teaching, read the last 100 today. This is a kind of biography, kind of reporting, kind of journal of Michael Jordan's first retirement from the NBA during his basically year and a half that he was retired from the NBA, which is kind of one of these fascinating little pieces of history in terms of, like, generally considered to be the greatest basketball player that has ever lived, suddenly in the middle of his career, and will be, for a lot of players, the prime of their career, is suddenly gone for a year and a half, right? And it's a thing that gets a lot of stuff and a lot of publicity. Not necessarily publicity, but there's a lot of rumors and theories about exactly why and things, right? And that's always going to exist with a person like Michael Jordan. But I think Bob Greene does a very, very fantastic job in not really giving into any of that. Bob Greene is a columnist, or was a columnist, I don't remember if he still writes or not, for the Chicago Tribune, and was basically Michael's confidant throughout a lot of his playing career, due to, I don't remember if it was an incident or something, but Michael basically just ended up having a lot of faith and trust within Bob Greene. And so Bob Greene got to travel and speak with Michael a great deal throughout these 2 years that he was playing baseball. Well, the year playing baseball, and then the year that he came back into the NBA, which is incredibly fascinating, right? Because I think it is the reason why there's so many conspiracy theories and beliefs about he can't have actually done this for this reason, I think comes down to a great deal of the lay person can never ever fathom what it is like to be the greatest at everything, or at a specific thing, right? And be memorialized in a way that you are, as Jordan is describing, like a living statue, right? No matter what you do, right, you're basically a walking logo. And I think for so many of us, we cannot fathom turning down something where you are making that much money, or you are that well acclaimed and that well famed, and then walking away from it to do something that's incredibly difficult, right? One of the oft-forgotten things about going into the retirement is that much of this focuses on the murder of Michael's father, which, right, from my own personal experience about the very sudden death of my father, is a kind of a whirlwind experience, right? And I was 18 at the time, and I had just turned 18, and my life got kind of flipped around, and there was a lot of things and opportunities and just that completely changed everything. And that was me being some random kid in a Midwestern town. To have that experience when you are at the height, the absolute pinnacle of your career, and considered by far the best that has ever done it, right? I cannot even fathom what that would be like, right? And so Michael goes and plays baseball, right? And he doesn't do great, but he also doesn't do terrible, right? But really, the baseball isn't the thing that really matters here, right? I think what makes Bob Greene very special, and why Michael Jordan ends up trusting him so much, is that Bob Greene is not like a sports writer, right? Bob Greene is a journalist, columnist that has covered and is often not about sports, right? And so this is a story about people, right? Instead of this being about a story about sports, right? It just has sports elements in it, which is kind of like a hard thing to describe, right? But like, I've read some of the Mike Lupica books. I've read one very, very recently, and like within that is a sports story where like we get pages and pages and pages of sports descriptions, and then we kind of get some stuff about the characters out of the way that they're playing or things, right? This, and the way that Bob Greene writes, is about what is happening off the court, or during these down times, and how is that affecting him in playing, right? It's a slight change in things, which is really, really nice, because I think it allows us to see someone that we just kind of envision as like a logo, or envision as this caricature, as much more of a person, which is something that we need to do a lot more often, just in general, right? We need to allow people to just be people. And I often think back to the Charles Barkley "I'm not a role model" ad, which is like, in a lot of ways was very, very shocking, but I still believe in very, very core to my belief that like these people that are inherently entertainers, right? And they are playing a game for us to enjoy. They themselves are not necessarily role models by what they do on the court, right? If they are given a platform, then they are absolutely allowed to share viewpoints and share things, but they themselves should not be expected to be perfect as people because they play a sport professionally, right? And yeah. So we go through the whole baseball stuff. Jordan describes his need for baseball to Bob Greene at one point as like taking the elevator versus taking the stairs, right? And it is this issue of like, if you're so used to riding the elevator and just arriving to where you need to go every single time, if you're someone who's inherently competitive, you kind of lose it after a while, and you lose that kind of spark and that fire, right? And so it's important that you find the stairs every once in a while and take the stairs. And in this case, right, in order to prove himself, prove to the world, prove to whoever he needed to prove, right, Jordan took the stairs, Jordan rides the bus. And does he do great? No, but he's decently successful at it, and it's really described from both Bob Greene's account through talking with leadership and management associated with the White Sox, as well as some teammates, as well as, you know, some other stuff, and some like outside resources that I'm vaguely aware of, that like there was a decent chance that second year that Michael Jordan could have been like a fifth outfielder for the Chicago White Sox, because he was hitting the ball a lot better, and his fielding was better, and he was still fast. But then there's this labor union strike with professional, with the MLB PA, Players Association, and Jordan's take on it is very much like the players are being selfish, not because they're asking for more money or for anything, right? They're selfish because this is money that they're never going to get back. It is also money that all the little guys are never going to get back. And by little guys, I mean the minor league players that get put into this horrendous situation, right? The minor league players, of where minor leaguers basically have no rights within the MLB and within professional baseball, because professional baseball gets to act like a monopoly, and they get paid almost nothing. But then during this labor union strike, which starts cutting into spring training, and eventually shorts the season a little bit, I believe, but they're basically being told by the major league union, you cannot play in games that are being like sold, so like spring training games that have tickets sold for them. Otherwise you're going to be in significant trouble and have significant consequences later down the road. But then also you have the owners that are saying, you need to play in these games so that we can sell tickets and make up some money. Otherwise you're never going to play again, right? And Jordan views it as the professional players, major league players, are making a decision that is inadvertently costing the lives of so many people that he really does end up caring about, right? Jordan eventually gets asked to play in some of these games, really kind of forced to play in some of these games, and at that point is when he walks away from the sport of baseball, right? And so despite everything, right, and despite all these promises that you know he's going to really prove himself, he ends up walking away because of a labor dispute, which is a thing that consistently actually happens with Michael Jordan throughout his career, because we go from this, and then the very next year, he's back with the Bulls for less than half the season, for like the last 15 games or whatever, and then the playoffs, and then the NBA goes into kind of this player strike because a lot of the big names associated with the NBA feel that the Players Association is not, and the Players Union is not representing them and representing the players in the way that they should. And so like we get into kind of this weird labor dispute, and Bob Greene kind of goes like, well, you know, it's kind of interesting that when Michael was kind of an outsider to all of this, you know, he viewed the players as selfish, and now he kind of views it as it's his duty to run. Later on in life, this is outside of the scope of this book, but later on, when Michael Jordan becomes the majority owner of the Charlotte Bobcats, Hornets then to Bobcats, I think it was. I don't remember exactly when he bought it. That the Charlotte Bobcats, that we go into the labor union strike and the Players Association strike before what would end being the losing a season by the Charlotte Bobcats. And a Michael Jordan comment there is kind of this belief that, you know, the economy is tanking. Everyone needs to be willing to take some of the hit on this, including the players, and players need to leave themselves and give up some money themselves, which is then also strange because in his retirement speech or his Hall of Fame induction speech, he makes note of the fact that it is the players that generate revenue, not the owners who are paying them, right? And he's very, very specific and confident in this. And so, like, you know, it's just kind of one of these fascinating little things about Michael Jordan, of where, like, his association with labor and labor unions is kind of this kind of roundabout thing, which I think is to be expected of anyone, right? I just think it is so fascinating coming from Michael Jordan because of how confident he is whenever he speaks to the media, right? So yeah. A great deal of this book also kind of details these issues of, like, Michael Jordan just trying to live some sort of life, right? And not have to worry about anything, right? And he's kind of constantly compared to both the minor league players during the first half of this book, and then also his NBA teammates, who are much more well-known, much more famous than his minor league counterparts. But even these other NBA players, a lot of them get to just kind of live life in a way and get to go to restaurants and do whatever. And Michael Jordan basically has to constantly isolate himself from everything, because if he's not isolated, then he's surrounded by people that want things from him, right? Which is, I think, is just another very hard concept to really understand. Michael Jordan ends up discussing with Bob Greene about, like, you know, it was one of the great things about baseball and golf is that it is space and it is empty, and it is you trying to beat yourself, right, in some ways. And another very famous baseball player ends up kind of having the same deal. Ken Griffey Jr., I don't remember if it was him or it was his dad, that ended up saying, you know, the only time that he, whether that be he, Ken Griffey Jr., really felt comfortable was when he was standing in center field by himself, because that was the only time that he didn't have to appease everyone else's perception of him. He just got to exist in silence for a little bit, and then just do what they did best, right? Yeah. That's kind of all my thoughts on this. Very fun read, very good read. Yeah, that's Bob Greene's Rebound.